Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a late night insight, and it's going to be again on a Bortnikoff. And I'm focusing on the House of Bortnikoff right now because the one thing I'm most looking forward to in the fragrance world is smelling my new collaboration between Dmitry Bortnikoff and the wonderful mind of Russian Adam, who owns Aries Ladore. Together, about a decade ago, they founded a oud distillery service called Feel Oud. And Russian Adam, of course, then went on to make Aries Ladore, and Dmitry Bortnikoff opened up Bortnikoff. So I'm doing some videos on some Bortnikoff fragrances, some samples that were sent to me, and I'm in this habit of sort of talking about these little samples, but not talking about the full bottles that I have. I always think there's time later on to do these, but I just sort of have been focusing on the samples, knock them out a video otherwise that I never would get to do. So somehow these have sort of taken priority on Channel Ram. So one of these days, the switch is going to flip, and I'm going to start focusing on the full bottles. But for now, we're still sort of knocking out some of these reviews that otherwise would get no love. And very interestingly, this particular one we're going to talk about today is an extremely rare Bortnikoff scent. But before we get into it, I want to do scent of the day because this is only the second time I've worn this since I've had it. And I've had this for about 3 years now. And this is Fendi pour Homme. And Fendi pour Homme is a designer that came out 11 years ago. It's discontinued now. It was created by 3 perfumers. Francois Demachy, who's probably the best known of the bunch, Delphine Lebeau Croillac, which I'm not too familiar with her work, and Benoit Lapausa, who's probably in between Francois Demachy and Delphine, as far as popularity goes. So this is actually a really good designer. I will tell you that. That's my thoughts on this. Now, but it is a designer. So if you go in expecting anything other than that, it has sort of the very common, sweet Tonka thing in the base, and almost that generic spicy thing that you start to get in lots of fragrances. Think, I don't know. This reminds me, there really isn't any specific designer it reminds me of. It just reminds me of that designer DNA, if you will. I'm sure you could pick out little bits and pieces of that generic, sweeter designer, masculine, modern masculine, let's say, of the last decade or so. But I like what they did here because they created a fresh take on a leather fragrance, and it's slightly citrusy in the opening. I like the way that the pepper is done, the pink pepper. I like the way the spices are done with the cardamom and the Egyptian geranium. And they say there's a Texas cedar note in here. So it's sort of designer woody, designer leathery into the dry down. But, I mean, it's July 3rd here in Texas. And this was my scent of the day. I wore it to work with the collared shirt, and it worked brilliantly. I am in an air-conditioned office, but this is discontinued. Don't pay huge money for it, but Fendi pour Homme, if you're looking for sort of a well-done designer that doesn't get hyped, you don't want to pay $300 for Midnight in Paris. If you find this floating around for 50, 60 bucks, grab it. Absolutely. Well worth the money. Fendi. Okay, so let's get into this Bortnikoff. Actually, I'm going to put a little bit more on because this fragrance is very interesting, and I'm enjoying it. So I'm just going to do, and it's one of these lucky scent dabbers, and there's actually something to this because the name of the fragrance is Lucky Oud. And the reason that is important is that this fragrance was actually made for Lucky Scent. It was a Lucky Scent exclusive, interestingly enough. In fact, if you look at the bottle, if you Google search an image of Bortnikoff's Lucky Oud, you'll actually see that on the front of the bottle, it says made for Lucky Scent. How cool is that? And only 100 bottles were made. So this is a rare one. And interestingly enough, the reason that this got pushed to the front of the line, well, of course, the new Oud Balsam that I'm waiting with heavy anticipation to arrive at my front door. But also, there are 0 reviews of this on YouTube. And I can see why. But anytime there's a fragrance out there where no one even bothered doing a review on, that's the type of content that I want to do. I don't give a shit if it gets me views or anything like that, because I'm not in this game. I'm not playing that game. I'm not doing the view chasing. I'm not trying to get an extra couple dollars on my monthly ad revenue or anything like that. It doesn't matter. But doing a fragrance review like this where there's absolutely nothing on it, that matters to me. And so Bortnikoff's Lucky Oud opens up with this traditional Dmitry Bortnikoff DNA in that you're going to get exotic florals and chocolatey oud from the very beginning. And I know what you're thinking. As soon as I said that, you're thinking this, Oud Monarch. And it's exactly what I thought the very first time I smelled it, but only for about half a millisecond, because as soon as I felt and smelled what the fragrance was doing, I put Oud Monarch out of my mind. Because even though you could claim this is a chocolate oudy fragrance, and technically that would be true, there's a lot more going on, and it goes in a little bit of a different direction. This is a very tough perfume for me to describe, and I'll tell you why. So this fragrance has touches of sort of that Bortnikoff signature DNA, if you will, but it also seems to be slightly aloof from his other fragrances when you compare to the rest of his line of work and the things from him that I really like. There is none of the classic cardamom top that you're used to smelling in Bortnikoff's work. It's missing from here, okay? So the spices are almost plucked out of this fragrance. And the use of oud is really different from my favorite Bortnikoff fragrances. So for example, Oud Maximus, Lao Oud. The dry down in Oud Monarch has this slightly animalic chocolatey oud in it. And Triad. Triad is one I actually reviewed within the last month or so. I did a review of Triad thanks to one of my perfume god people very kindly sent me a couple precious drops of Triad, and I was able to do a review. I really enjoyed Triad. Triad is probably one of the best Bortnikoffs that I don't have a full bottle of in my collection as far as my nose goes. And you know, that's an animalic oud. And here, so what's interesting about the top of Lucky Oud is that just like with Oud Monarch, everyone calls it a chocolate oud. And while it is true that it is technically a chocolate oud, if you pay attention and you actually smell with your nose instead of what people are telling you to smell, you will notice that there are these beautiful florals in the top of Oud Monarch. And with Oud Monarch, it's frangipani and magnolia. And that's one of Bortnikoff's, I would say, superpowers, if you will. One of the things that he really does best, maybe better than any of his competitors or peers or anything like that, is his use of florals is out of this world. No clue why. Absolutely no clue why he's able to create these floral compositions using notes that are so different and out there. Very few perfumers have mastered using frangipani and magnolia and lotus flowers, and somehow he just has almost naturally, almost instinctively from the very first fragrance that he's made, right? So with Lucky Oud, it is the wild Thai lotus flower, okay? That is the flower that you're going to get in as soon as you put the fragrance on your skin. You're going to smell that chocolatey, cakey oud, and it's almost like a chocolate cake. And we'll get to that too as we talk about how it progresses. But in the opening, you're going to get this brilliant wild Thai lotus flower infused with Indian sandalwood. And I will tell you that the Indian sandalwood note here is buttery smooth. It is silky smooth. It's extremely relaxing. It smells very, very natural. And there's Indian sandalwood in the top, and there's Bengali sandalwood in the base. So the fragrance, as it progresses, you know, just this creamy, buttery, milky sandalwood all throughout the fragrance. And so for me, interestingly enough, one thing you should know about lotus flowers, because I can't sit here and claim to be an expert on them, but I will tell you this. You should Google the Thai lotus flower. Google what a Thai lotus flower looks like. They are absolutely beautiful, gorgeous flowers. There's some pictures of some folks in boats going through the ponds where the Thai lotus flowers are sort of popping up through the lily pads, and the colors of the flowers are just vibrant. I mean, they're almost like those flowers that they show on the TVs whenever you walk into Costco and they're trying to show how vibrant the brand new TVs can make the colors, you know? And they show those extremely pink just sea of flowers on the water, right? That's the lotus flower. But in this case, it's the Thai lotus flower. And it grows in, lotus flowers are very resilient, but they like to grow in places like ponds or mud where there's just like a lot of water, right? And the easiest way for me to describe the smell of Lucky Oud is, imagine Dmitry Bortnikoff. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a sidetrack here, because if I had never smelled this other fragrance I'm going to talk about now, it would be very hard for me to describe what I'm smelling here. But if you've ever smelled Clandestine Laboratories Novichok, okay, Novichok is a almost chocolate cake, like an almondy chocolate cake gourmand fragrance that Mark Sage created for Clandestine Laboratories. And if you're interested in knowing more about Mark Sage and his brand Clandestine Laboratories, there's actually a review that I have on the channel of him. He was kind enough to come on the channel and talk about sort of who he is and what he stands for. And he's the guy that doesn't want to smell any of the other work because he doesn't want to contaminate sort of his, he doesn't want to contaminate his original ideas by smelling other things. He wants to sort of keep all of that stuff away and just make his own stuff, right? Which is admirable, but it's an extremely hard way to go about things because you don't have that frame of reference. You know, you don't know the classics. You don't know the Miss Dior's and the Samsaras and, you know, all that good stuff. You don't know it because you've never smelled it. So on one side, it's very honorable. On the other side, it's a very hard way, I think, to sort of go about navigating the waters of the fragrance world. But if you've smelled Novichok, or if you know anything about it, it's basically a fragrance that the name is a play on the Russian nerve agent called Novichok. And the reason that he ended up naming it that is because it is a huge fragrance. And it's almost like, you know, letting off a nerve agent when you spray it. I mean, it's gigantic. It is huge. And the chocolate cake note, which normally you would think, oh, Ramsey would hate that because it's so disgustingly sweet. Somehow he was able to make this almost like chocolate, almost like you could see the texture of the chocolate cake. Imagine a fork cutting a chocolate cake, and the chocolate cake is being sliced so thin that some of it sort of starts to crumble, you know, on this side of the fork, but the rest of it, you know, is a pretty straight line, but the part you've cut is kind of crumbling, and you can just feel the texture of the cake, right? And that's how the fragrance smells, but it's not disgustingly sweet like you would expect. He managed to navigate, I think, the perils of having a really sweet gourmand by using florals like jasmine and stuff like that. I'm not sure of the entire breakdown, but I do remember there being some sort of pretty big floral, you know, rose jasmine thing with maybe that cacao chocolate cake feel, a Papanax and cinnamon, right? Resins and cinnamon and stuff like that. And whenever I smelled it, I actually remember saying, man, I could totally see there being a little bit of oud in here. I don't think he said there was any oud in there. But it felt like there was a touch of this oud note, right? And so Lucky Oud, to me, feels like Bortnikoff takes this chocolate cake like cacao, adds some additional powder, adds that milky, smooth sandalwood, and I would have guessed, just like with Novichok, that there is a jasmine note in Lucky Oud, because it has a little bit of that slightly indolic feel to it. But there's no jasmine note listed. There is a note of tea rose. And when you mix that tea rose with the oud, with the sandalwood, you start to get vibes of another of my favorite fragrances, and that is Ottoman Empire. So this is a much more chocolatey take on Ottoman Empire. But obviously they're not exact replicas or anything, but just so you kind of get in the ballpark. So imagine a little bit of this chocolatey oud style, Oud Monarch-esque, because it is a slightly chocolatey oud, but the focus is on that Thai lotus and that Indian sandalwood note in the top. And, you know, but imagine that rose, sandalwood, oud combination that Ottoman Empire gives you. And there's a little hint of that in Lucky Oud. And the DNA with that chocolate cake smell from Novichok, that's basically that's how I would describe the fragrance as somebody who knows those fragrances. To somebody that doesn't, here's what Dmitry Bortnikoff had to say. Here's a quote from Bortnikoff. Working with Lucky Scent is a great honor and a great responsibility. So in this collaboration, I used one of the best and most unusual of my ideas, lotus infused in sandalwood. In many different cultures, the lotus is regarded as an ultimate symbol of rebirth and enlightenment, a flower that grows in the mud and earth until blossoming into the sunlight as a perfect, pure flower. What more ideal bloom, therefore, to incorporate into Bortnikoff's first Lucky Scent exclusive fragrance. An exquisite blend of rich, compelling oud with a unique and precious infusion of wild Thai lotus flowers, 760 in all, into pure sandalwood oil. The result is exceptional. The heady, sweet lotus blossom set perfectly into creamy sandalwood, and the sandalwood is creamy, no doubt about that. It's creamy, milky, buttery. It has this... It almost has this like lemony, spongy, buttery texture, if that makes sense. That's the way it feels like in my mind. And it's all balanced against this earthy, animalic, regal power of oud. Now, I will take exception with that. Because the earthiness, yes. Animalic, no. This oud does not feel animalic to me. In fact, that is probably one of the biggest reasons why this fragrance would continue to sit on the back burner for me. Because... you know, even though it's a Thai oud note is basically what it is, and Thai oud from what I have smelled has this sweet character to it. In fact, sometimes it's even known as sweet Thai oud. And you know, you can pick it up, but it doesn't have that animalic facet to me. I much prefer the ouds when they're done in the animalic facet. So go watch my video on Triad if you want to hear about a Bortnikoff fragrance that really focuses on that animalic aspect, because Triad, if memory serves, was oud with animalic. So it was an animalic oud with animalics like castoreum and civet and stuff like that. And this is, I would say, a much easier fragrance to digest for the masses. It's a beautiful composition. I really enjoy it. And to finish out the way that they describe it from basically the little blurb from Bortnikoff, it says, potent but graceful, meditative but sensual. Lucky Oud is a fragrance of rare complexity, and with only 100 bottles available, it's also simply rare. So Fragrantica says that this came out in 2019, and Parfumo says 2020. So, you know, let's say 3 or 4 years old, whatever you want to call it. But again, only 100 pieces were made, and that's pretty much it. So imagine this sort of floral oriental style with slightly gourmand qualities because of that chocolate cakey oud, if you will, and a unique flower, which is Bortnikoff's sort of superpower, using these very rare, distinct flowers that you're usually not going to find in fine French perfumery. This goes against the French bouquet of ylang ylang, jasmine, rose, right? Maybe a little bit of lily of the valley. You may smell stuff like that in Chanel's and Dior's and Guerlain's and all that stuff. You very rarely are going to find a lotus flower or a frangipani fragrance or a magnolia fragrance or something like that, right? So, and that's sort of where Bortnikoff really shines, and this gives you that. It gives you something different. It also, having those flowers infused into the sandalwood, it feels like you're getting a very high quality fragrance, because I have some of the sandalwoods that they sell on the Feel Oud website, thanks to Russian Adam. And, you know, I've put real, you know, sandalwood oil, high quality sandalwood oil on my skin just as a drop of the pure oil. And I can tell you that the sandalwood in this scent really does stand out. It's extremely milky, smooth, buttery, creamy, whatever you want to call it. It's all of those things. And it smells extremely high quality. And then, of course, you get the gourmand touches with the vanilla and the cacao and that chocolate cake aspect. I like it. I just think I still much prefer Oud Monarch for this style. But it's too bad that this was just such a limited release, Lucky Oud, because I think that this might have been pretty popular had it had more than only 100 bottles in existence, let's say. It is the when they made these, apparently Lucky Oud was made with the vintage wood cap. So it's before he went to the metal caps, which is one of the ways that many collectors tell if it's an older or newer bottle. And so this is when Bortnikoff was really firing on all cylinders. And so yes, it's definitely a fragrance that deserves to have a video done of it on YouTube. It's almost a slight to the fragrance that actually, if you search for Bortnikoff Lucky Oud, you'll find a couple of for me anyways, it was like the first two were videos that I did on completely different Bortnikoff fragrances. And then I think one or two, you know, there was maybe one or two other videos from a few other reviewers. And then it was like back to my Bortnikoff top 5 or family portrait or something. So there's very little on some of these Bortnikoffs, and this is one where there was no review, so I thought it would be worthwhile putting this out there just in case, you know, someone stumbles across a bottle someone else is selling, they want to look it up, they want to learn about the fragrance. Probably most people didn't even know this fragrance was out there, especially being a Lucky Scent exclusive. And it's funny because whenever I search for it, if you search for Bortnikoff Lucky Oud, at least on my search engine, it took me to Lucky Scent, but it didn't take me to Lucky Oud. It took me to like Mysterious Oud or something where you could still buy. So it is an extrait de parfum, and so yes, it's an interesting composition. I've worn it to bed twice now. This is actually the second time. You can see I put a pretty damn good sized dent in this little 1 mil or whatever it is, a mil and a half little sample. I don't know who sent me this one. I'm sorry to whoever the perfume, as I drop it, to whoever the perfume god person is who sent me that. Thank you. Appreciate you watching. If you've been lucky enough to smell Lucky Oud, do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the Bortnikoff brand. Let me know if you ordered any of the Feel Oud fragrances, if you're excited to try them. And I love seeing your faces in the comments. Thanks for watching this late night insight. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.